I'm just interested in your opinion. Is, often someone will be very angry, now they're going to be on trial and obviously they want to defend themselves, or, they've been sent a non-molestation order or a restraining order and they'll be very angry. And the way I often talk to people is I say, we live in a society that creates certain boundaries, and what's happening is you're bouncing up against one of those boundaries and society is sending you a message. And so you have quite a lot of choice at this point about what you want to do, about how far you want to take it. Now, you talked about the line, and I'm saying whether you want to cross that line, and then society will stop you in your tracks. And that's kind of the way I talk about it. I'm interested in your take on that.
I think that's a very good way of looking at it, Maria. And the way I put it is that line is actually created, if you want to look at it this way, by the whole of our society, not by us as individuals making laws which set out the line, but by electing people to Parliament, and Parliament then draws the line. And anything that a police officer or a prosecutor does is governed by where Parliament has indicated that a certain kind of conduct is going to be marked as criminal. Now, where it isn't, then you can do it. And the way lawyers in England often talk about our system of legal precedent, and what that means is that actually you're entitled to do anything you like unless Parliament has come along, or we could say the common law, or Parliament has come along and said, actually, that is conduct which is not acceptable to society, so therefore you can't do that any longer. So it's permissive,
that's why
except where there's something that has been marked as criminal.
I mean, I
now,
think
you
where I went,
people who are angry, people who are violent. For me, if you are personally violent to another person,
and I was thinking about some of the
sort
of stuff I do,
put someone in fear of violence, that is almost always
and the way
conduct.
I talk about it.
And I'll give you an example from when I was Director of Public Prosecutions.
Often
we had
will be very
a system,
angry,
still have it, of
now
what
they're
called
going to be on
conditional
trial,
cautions.
and obviously they want to defend
that meant
themselves.
That any of the police forces, we have
they've been
43
sent
of them
a
across England and Wales,
non-molestation
could come to me
order
and say,
or a restraining
we
order,
think that we can
very
deal
angry.
with some people.
And the way I often talk to people
instead of
is I
putting
say,
them through the court process,
we live in a
by
society
giving them a
that
conditional
creates
caution. Can
certain
we
boundaries,
agree with you as the DPP
and
a list of
happening is
offences, a list of types of
bouncing
conduct,
up against one of
which
those
although we
boundaries,
could
and
prosecute
society
it,
is sending
we think
you a
actually
message.
everyone
And
would be
so
better
you have
served by
quite a lot
finding
of
a way
choice at
of
this point about
marking
what
that
you
with
want
what's
to
called a
do,
caution, setting conditions to that, and
how
saying to the
far you
individual,
want to take
if you
it.
stop
Now, you
acting
talked
in that
about
way,
the line, and I'm saying
we're
whether
sure
you
you're not
want
going
to
to do it
cross that
again,
line,
you won't face
and then
a
society
formal
will
appearance in
stop
court.
you
But
in
if
your
you do,
tracks.
you will.
And that's kind of
And
the way I talk
those lists
about
would come
it.
to
I'm
me. I think there
interested
were
in your
8
take
police
on that.
forces I remember coming to me quite early in my time for me to assess and then sign off these conditional caution schemes. I wouldn't sign them if it involved, for example, knife crime or robbery on the street, or what I said before, violence to the person. But I would sign them where you might be looking at someone who was committing shoplifting, even on a habitual basis. But there was a background to that. There was a kind of reason for that through deprivation, through drug use, etc., where with the right work, with the right input, some of those police-led schemes were really effective in showing people another course. And instead of them coming back into court every month or every 2 months and getting a slightly longer sentence or a slightly heavier fine and going out and committing a crime again, we saw that that stopped. And, in legal language, recidivism considerably reduced. So the way you police that line with a small p can be really important in looking at how to deal with some elements of, what you might call crime wave. And that out of court possibility, the possibility of an out of court disposal, I think is really important, particularly at the moment where we've got a criminal justice system that is in paralysis because there's so many cases waiting to be heard. I emphasized again, though, this is not about saying to a violent individual, we're too busy to take you to court, let's not bother. It is about saying in other instances where there's 2 ways of looking at it, and you don't represent a risk to other people, can we find a way of dealing with you? We may go on to discuss how particularly relevant that is, in my view, to young people who, if they're criminalized by the age of 14, 15, or 16, we know their life chances are going to be dramatically impacted. It does not mean that you never lock up a teenager. There are times when you should, and you really must do that. But in other instances, that sort of gateway to the criminal justice system, if you guard it very carefully, can turn people away from crime at a very early stage in their lives, and we're all better off if that happens.
Yeah, so you've done something. There could be a way of dealing with it. It takes it takes them to the precipice, and then they get a chance to look over and see where they could be going, and a chance to turn back. But I suppose because I work very close to the ground, the issue for me with that is then there has to be services around to support people, because if the services aren't there, as you said, if people commit crimes and there's deprivation or addiction or, some other sort of traumatic history in their life, then we've got to be able to, I mean, that's out of your league, but it would be nice for you to know that those services existed and could be relied upon. And then we have a much better chance of turning people away from repetitive crime.
Absolutely right. And, two quick points on that. I'm very proud to be the chair of the Board of Trustees for the Drive Forward Foundation. And we work right across Greater London, and we have plans to expand beyond London and have done for 15 years with care experienced young people. So teenagers who are coming out of sometimes foster homes, but very often care homes, with none of the family or parental support that, most of us enjoy as I start to life. And they are exactly the young people who can fall prey to crime gangs, who can find themselves criminalized and even serving terms of detention as very young people. Their life chances are damaged twice over. That their care experience and they don't have parents to look after them, and then they have this tag of being a youth criminal. So it's really important in those cases that while you can't say it's carte blanche, do what you like, we're not going to charge you because you're care experienced. But in many instances, if you find a better way of dealing with that, care experienced people are just as brilliant and able to make a contribution to life and earn a living and do fantastic things as other kids who have privileges in their background. So they need to be nurtured rather than just punished from day one. But the point you're making is absolutely right. In order to be constructive and to try to turn people away from being sucked into the criminal justice system, you have to have a mechanism. You can't just say, we're not charging you this time, carry on. You need to say, here are the support services to make sure that you're going to go down the right path. If we were in Scandinavia, Maria, we'd be looking at what's called the Barnahus model, which is, if you want to look at it, it's a kind of detention facility, but it's not a prison. But even for the most serious crimes, they have a way of dealing with and investing in young people, which is surrounded by what we would call social services and support, mental, physical, and otherwise, which allows young lives to be encouraged and be more productive. What we need in this country is something like that. We need greater investment on that borderline between going to court and being constructive, particularly with young lives. And then we would find that not only are we being more constructive, but there'd be less cost to the criminal justice system, fewer cases clogging up our courts, and it would be more productive all round.